We did not fear war. That is the first lie I must confess. We claimed evolution had refined us beyond brutality. Within the luminous spires of the Galactic Academy, conflict existed only in archived simulations and sanitized historical lectures. Our gymnasium, an immense amphitheater of polished alloy and gravitic stabilizers, was a place of controlled exertion, not danger. We trained for discipline, for health, for prestige. Then the doors opened. The change was not visual. It was atmospheric. My species evolved on a world where survival depended on detecting predators before sight confirmed them. We sensed chemical irregularities, micro-variations in air composition, the faint electric tremor of intent. When the entrance seal dilated, the air shifted in a way my instincts had not registered since childhood. Silence fell in ripples. He stepped inside without announcement. The human, officially designated Deathworlder exchange student, a diplomatic inclusion, a cultural bridge. He wore no armor, no kinetic bracers, no adaptive shielding, only a simple dark training uniform that concealed more than it revealed. His limbs were compact, musculature dense beneath fabric, his posture upright but unthreatening. That frightened us most. Predators on my world advertise dominance. They flare spines, widen crests, bare venomous appendages. This one did none of that. He simply looked. His eyes moved across the chamber, not nervously, not arrogantly, but analytically. I followed the trajectory of his gaze and realized with a tightening in my thoracic cavity that he was mapping the room. Entrances, exits, structural beams, elevated positions, threat vectors. A murmur trembled through the upper tiers. "Earth," someone whispered behind me. "Category 9 biosphere," another responded. "Extreme gravity, unstable tectonics, apex predators in plural, microbial hostility indices that would require full environmental suits for most of us. They survive there, naturally." Our instructor, Instructor Vaylor, descended from the observation platform with forced composure. Her frill remained half-raised, a tell she likely believed subtle. It was not. "Cadets," she announced, voice amplified evenly across the chamber. "Today we welcome our exchange participant from Earth. You will extend courtesy." Courtesy. The human inclined his head slightly. The gesture was minimal, controlled, respectful. And then, he smiled. It was not wide, not baring teeth in threat, but the corners of his mouth curved upward with a calmness that unsettled every survival instinct I possessed. Because predators that smile do so for one of two reasons. They are amused, or they are confident. The instructor activated the first drill sequence, cooperative warm-up rotations, low-gravity dynamic movement intended to assess baseline coordination. "Pair randomly," she instructed. No one moved toward him. Not immediately. I watched as subtle avoidance patterns formed. Cadets shifted left or right, forming clusters that left a small, precise gap around the human, a void in the center of the gymnasium. He noticed. Of course he noticed. But instead of displaying offense, he stepped forward into the empty space and waited. Gravity hummed at standard galactic calibration, comfortable, forgiving, for us. I remembered the comparative data scrolling across the Academy network when his transfer file was released. Earth gravity nearly double our norm. Which meant this environment was easy for him. The realization spread across the chamber like cold mist. Instructor Vaylor gestured toward the human. "Cadet Saren," she called, my name. "You will partner first." My lower limbs nearly locked. Refusal would be dishonorable. Acceptance felt irrational. I descended the steps. Each movement toward him heightened the chemical sharpness in the air. Up close, he did not radiate aggression. There was no flared dominance, no rapid pulse visible beneath his skin. He seemed steady. "Are you comfortable?" he asked. His voice was lower than ours, textured, not threatening, simply direct. "Comfortable?" Standing within striking distance of a being evolved under extinction-level pressures. "I am adequate," I managed. The starting tone chimed. We began with mirrored movement drills, step, pivot, extend. His reactions were immediate, perfectly synchronized. When I accelerated, he matched without visible strain. When I feinted, he adjusted as if reading intention before motion. He was not overpowering me. He was studying me. That was worse. Around us, the other cadets slowed their exercises, attention narrowing. No one wished to appear obvious. Everyone was watching. His grip met my forelimb for rotational balance. The contact was warm, firm, controlled. There was strength there, coiled, patient, vast, not exerted, merely present, like a star held in restraint. We completed the first sequence without incident. I withdrew, pulse elevated beyond training parameters. He released immediately. No lingering dominance, no display. Just that faint, measured smile. Instructor Valor cleared her throat. Excellent. We will proceed to applied agility drills. The word applied echoed differently now, because something fundamental had shifted. We had believed we were observing an exchange student. Instead, it felt as though a force of nature had quietly taken attendance among us. And as the gravity modulators hummed louder in preparation for the next phase, I realized a truth that chilled me deeper than fear. We were no longer practicing in safety. We were being measured, and the real test had not yet begun. Gravity, we believed, was a constant, a universal agreement between matter and motion, a fair and impartial force that pressed equally upon us all. We were wrong. The gymnasium recalibrated with a low harmonic hum, stabilizing its standard galactic gravity, 1.0 academic baseline, comfortable, neutral, designed so no species would hold advantage. For us.
Instructor Valor addressed the human directly. If you require environmental adjustment, submit request now. A polite offer, a merciful one. He shook his head once. This is fine. Fine. The word moved through the chamber like a thermal drop. Earth's gravity registers at 1.8 baseline, nearly double, which meant that from infancy, his musculoskeletal system developed under crushing force. Every step he had ever taken carried weight we would consider punitive, every breath drawn against atmospheric density thicker than ours. And this gentle academic setting, was relief to him. The sprint tone shrieked. We launched. Endurance sprinting across a dynamic track that shifted elevation and friction coefficients in real time. My limbs pumped in practiced rhythm, claws finding traction against the alloy surface as the path inclined sharply. I was among the faster cadets. At least I had been. Within the first rotation, 2 students dropped pace. By the second, their breathing grew ragged, frills dimming with oxygen strain. The human ran beside us. Not ahead, beside. His strides were shorter than mine, yet covered equal distance. Efficient, no wasted kinetic output. Arms angled precisely, spine aligned, breathing steady, in through the nose, controlled exhale through the mouth. He did not look fatigued. He looked measured. The track steepened to a 40-degree incline. My thighs trembled. He adjusted cadence by fractional increments, compensating for slope without visible exertion. There was no flailing, no desperate lunging for balance. He ran as if gravity were a suggestion, as if weight were negotiable. Halfway through the cycle, Cadet Vorin stumbled. The shifting platform destabilized beneath him. The human's hand shot out, not frantic, not panicked, precise. He stabilized Vorin with minimal force, preventing a fall without interrupting his own stride. Then he released. No acknowledgement, no performance.
The sprint ended with the human's pulse only marginally elevated, according to the bio-readouts now circulating across our retinal overlays. Instructor Valor's frill flattened. Impact conditioning, she announced, voice thinner than before. The kinetic orbs activated along the chamber walls, dense spheres coated in adaptive padding, designed to simulate battlefield collisions without catastrophic injury. They launched at variable velocities, testing reflex and resilience. The first orb struck my shoulder and sent me staggering back 2 steps. Pain bloomed sharp and instructive. Another cadet absorbed a glancing blow and collapsed to one knee. Then one targeted the human. Direct chest trajectory, velocity, high-tier setting. It hit him squarely. The sound echoed, a heavy thud against dense resistance. He did not stagger. He did not brace visibly. He caught it. One hand closed around the sphere mid-rebound, fingers compressing the padding with quiet authority. For a suspended heartbeat, no one moved. His gaze flicked to the orb, then to the instructor. "Return?" he asked calmly. "Return?" Instructor Valor swallowed. "Yes, controlled velocity." He adjusted grip, calculated angle, and sent the orb back toward the launcher with moderated force. Perfect arc, no aggression. Overlay data cascaded through my vision. Skeletal density, 1.4 times galactic standard. Muscle fiber density, anomalous distribution, high compression tolerance. Cardiovascular efficiency, outside expected Academy variance. These were not enhancements, they were baseline. A species forged under constant environmental hostility does not require augmentation, it becomes augmentation. The next sequence initiated without warning, paired grappling assessment. My name appeared again on the assignment grid. Of course it did. I stepped forward, limbs heavier than before, not from fatigue, but awareness. He met me at the center. Up close, I could see faint discolorations along his forearms, scar tissue.
Old injuries healed imperfectly, evidence of prior impact. He noticed my gaze. Training accidents, he said lightly. Training. The implication coiled inside my mind. We assumed battle created warriors. On Earth, even preparation leaves scars. Are you comfortable? He asked again, voice lower now, without chamber amplification. Comfortable. The absurdity nearly broke my composure. I initiated the grapple. Speed was my advantage. My species evolved with rapid twitch musculature optimized for burst maneuvers. I pivoted left, feinted high, aimed to destabilize his center of mass. He adjusted before contact. Not countering, anticipating. His hand intercepted my wrist, not crushing, not wrenching, redirecting momentum with surgical precision. My balance inverted, my center shifted. The mat rose to meet me. 3 seconds. That is how long I lasted. Yet I did not feel pain. He absorbed my descent, guiding the fall so my cranial ridge avoided impact. His knee pinned my secondary limb just firmly enough to immobilize without strain. Complete control. 0 damage. He leaned closer, not threateningly, but to ensure I could hear. Breathe, he murmured. I realized I had stopped. He released instantly once the timer chimed. No triumph. No display of superiority. He even offered a hand to assist me upright. The chamber was silent. Not the earlier whispering tension. Not fearful murmuring. Silence. The kind that forms when collective understanding recalibrates. Strength alone is predictable. Strength with restraint is not. He could have shattered joints, dislocated limbs, demonstrated dominance beyond dispute. Instead, he measured every newton of force, limited himself to protect us. A predator consciously choosing gentleness among fragile beings. Instructor Valor dismissed the drill early. Hydration interval, she announced. We dispersed mechanically. No one spoke at first.
The human retrieved a container from his pack and drank calmly, as if he had not just redefined our understanding of physical limits. I flexed my wrist where he had held me. No swelling, no microfractures, only the memory of controlled power. Across the chamber, cadets who had once whispered now stared openly, not with ridicule, not even entirely with fear, but with something more destabilizing: recognition. Gravity had always been our equalizer, our guarantee of fairness. But to a being raised beneath crushing skies, gravity is merely training. If this was him at ease, if this was him holding back, then what precisely would he become under pressure? The next drill sequence began initializing, and for the first time since his arrival, I felt something sharper than anxiety: anticipation. Because I was beginning to suspect that today was not about proving his strength, it was about revealing how much of it he was choosing not to use. And that realization was heavier than gravity itself. Curiosity is a dangerous instinct. It overrides fear. It steps closer to the edge when survival demands retreat. During hydration interval, we told ourselves we were merely observing, maintaining diplomatic courtesy, gathering data. In truth, we were orbiting him, not close enough to trigger territorial reflex, not far enough to appear dismissive. The human sat on the lower tier of the gymnasium steps, forearms resting loosely on his knees, container clasped between his hands. Perspiration darkened the collar of his uniform, but his breathing had already stabilized. Recovery speed, abnormal. Cadet Voren spoke first. Is it true, he asked carefully, that your world contains multiple apex predators? The human glanced up. Yes. No embellishment, no pride. How many? Someone pressed. He tilted his head slightly, considering. Depends on how you define apex. A ripple of unease moved through us. Large terrestrial carnivores, I clarified. Dominant megafauna. He nodded once.
Several. Historically more. Meaning extinction did not eliminate the concept, only individual species. And your kind survived this? Another cadet asked. A faint crease formed between his brows, as if the question puzzled him. We're still there, he replied. The simplicity of it unsettled me more than any boast could have. I shifted closer despite myself. Natural disasters? I asked. Your atmospheric reports indicate extreme instability. He exhaled softly, almost amused. Storms, floods, wildfires, earthquakes, volcanoes, droughts, freezing winters, heat waves. He ticked them off on his fingers as if reciting common inconveniences. Our frills dimmed. Your infrastructure tolerates this frequency? Voren asked. Sometimes, he said. Sometimes it doesn't. Silence deepened. On our worlds, catastrophe is statistical anomaly, a deviation swiftly corrected by planetary engineering councils. Civilizations exist to prevent collapse. On Earth, collapse is scheduled. Why remain? I asked before I could restrain myself. Why not terraform, stabilize tectonics, moderate weather? He took a measured drink before answering. Because things go wrong. The words settled like a stone dropped into still water. That was not an explanation. It was a philosophy. Civilization exists to prevent things from going wrong, I insisted. He gave a small shrug. Ours exists to respond when they do. The difference felt seismic. He described coastal cities rebuilt after hurricanes, agricultural systems adapted after blight, medical science forged in response to invisible pathogens. Invisible, one cadet repeated. Microorganisms, he clarified, bacteria, viruses. You can't see them without magnification, but they can end you. Several cadets reflexively checked their dermal seals. You coexist with unseen lethal entities, Voren asked, incredulous. We study them, the human replied. We vaccinate, we treat, we adapt. And war? I asked quietly.
That word altered the air again. He did not flinch. We study that too. There was no triumph in his tone, no glorification. Study, I pressed. We analyze mistakes, improve logistics, improve communication, improve protection for civilians. His jaw tightened slightly. We try not to repeat the worst parts. Try. Resilience in our academies meant surviving once, enduring a singular trial and emerging intact. To humans, resilience was iterative, continuous, a muscle strengthened by repetition of adversity. The hydration interval ended too soon. Instructor Veor signaled the next drill, cooperative obstacle navigation. A suspended course unfolded from the ceiling, interlocking platforms, shifting balance beams, compression corridors calibrated for team traversal. Success required coordination, not dominance. Teams were assigned. Again, I found myself aligned with the human. This time, fewer cadets hesitated. Fear had thinned, replaced by a tense expectancy. The starting tone sounded. We surged forward. The first platform destabilized under collective weight. Cadet Voren overcompensated, merely sending two of us tumbling. Stop, the human said, not loudly, but with clarity that cut through chaos. We froze. He scanned the structure in seconds. You, he pointed to our heaviest cadet, rear support, anchor center beam. A blink of hesitation. Trust me. Something in his voice carried gravitational pull stronger than the field beneath us. The cadet repositioned. You two, lighter mass, front span, don't step simultaneously, offset by half second. He adjusted our spacing with brief touches, guiding elbows, shifting stance angles, redistributing load vectors, as if calculating stress tolerances instinctively. Move on my count. Not the instructor's. His. We moved. The beam dipped but held. Second platform, rotational axis unstable. Widest stance, he directed. Lower center of gravity. Think like it's going to fail. Going to fail. Not might, not could, will.
We crossed faster than projected time. Midway, the corridor narrowed, compression walls pulsing inward at irregular intervals.
Cadet Seraph misjudged timing and froze. The walls accelerated. The human stepped back into the narrowing gap. "Eyes on me," he told Seraph calmly. "Breathe. When I say move, you move." Muscles tightened beneath fabric. Veins surfaced briefly along his neck. He held, for 2 heartbeats too long, then slipped through just as the corridor sealed behind him. He had not panicked. He had predicted failure and planned around it. We reached the final platform seconds ahead of competing teams. Instructor Vaylor's crest flickered with undisguised astonishment. "Team 3, she announced. "First completion." We did not celebrate. We stared at the human. He was not winded, not triumphant, merely attentive, checking for injuries, ensuring no one limped, no joint hyperextended. "You think like collapse is inevitable," I said quietly. He met my gaze. "Because it is," he answered. "Eventually." There was no fatalism in his tone, only preparation. The realization settled heavy within me. This was not about superior strength, not about higher gravity tolerance or denser bone structure. It was about assumption. We assumed safety until proven otherwise. He assumed danger until proven stable. One mindset breeds comfort, the other breeds survival. Respect replaced fear in that moment. Not fully, not comfortably, but undeniably. Yet beneath that respect coiled something darker. If this is how they train their youth, if this level of awareness, this capacity for controlled force and predictive adaptation exists before full maturity, then what does a human soldier look like? What does a veteran of their wars carry behind their eyes? The final tone of the session echoed through the chamber.
As we dispersed, I noticed something I had not seen before. The other cadets no longer avoided standing near him. They adjusted themselves around him, as if unconsciously aligning with a gravitational field stronger than the one beneath our feet. And I began to suspect that the Academy had not invited a simple exchange student. It had invited a lesson, one the galaxy might not be prepared to learn. Disaster does not announce itself, it interrupts. The final rotation of cooperative drills had just begun when the hum beneath our feet shifted pitch. At first it was subtle, a fluctuation in the gravitatic stabilizers, a tremor too slight for most species to register. But my kind evolved to sense environmental instability. The air tightened. Then the floor lurched. Gravity spiked to 1.3 baseline without warning. Several cadets collapsed instantly, limbs buckling under unexpected weight. A heartbeat later, the field dipped to 0.6, bodies lifted awkwardly, balance destroyed. A scream pierced the chamber as someone struck a wall mid-float. "System recalibration," Instructor Vaylor barked, frill flaring in alarm. "Stand by." Stand by? The kinetic projectors lining the upper walls flickered erratically. Their safety dampeners failed with an audible crackle. One orb misfired, then another. Impact conditioning spheres launched at unscheduled velocities, ricocheting unpredictably as gravity oscillated. Panic detonated. Cadets scattered without formation. One collided with me as weight returned at 1.5 baseline, driving us both to the floor. My forelimbs scraped against alloy. The light strobed crimson. Containment breach protocol. "Remain calm," Vaylor shouted, though her voice fractured under strain. Calm is theoretical when the laws of physics begin to stutter. A beam above us groaned. Structural support struts are not designed for rapid gravitic fluctuation. The strain translated through the framework in metallic shrieks that reverberated through my bones. I looked up. The support beam directly overhead fractured along a stress seam. Time slowed. There are moments when instinct commands movement. There are others when fear locks every joint in place. My limbs refused to obey. The crack widened. I understood with clinical clarity that I would not move in time. Then he moved. I did not see the initiation of motion. One instant he was across the chamber, bracing a fallen cadet against ricochet. The next he was between me and the descending beam. Impact. The sound was not a clang, it was a violent, resonant boom, reinforced alloy colliding with something stronger than expected. The beam struck his shoulder instead of my cranial crest. For an impossible second, both held. Then metal buckled. Not him. The beam split along its weakened seam, sliding off his frame and crashing against the floor beside us. He staggered half a step. Only half. Move. The command was not shouted, it was precise, authority without title. My paralysis shattered. I scrambled backward, dragging another cadet with me. Gravity spiked again, 2.0 baseline for a breath-stealing instant. Several students screamed as their knees hit the floor under crushing force. The human did not scream. He scanned.
Not wildly, strategically. "Kinetic Launcher 3 is cycling," he called out. "Stay clear of the west wall." Another orb fired at lethal velocity. He intercepted its trajectory with a deflecting shove, redirecting it into an unoccupied barrier panel. The panel shattered, the orb embedded harmlessly in insulation foam. Instructor Valor struggled at the central console, attempting manual override. "Control relays are desynchronized," she shouted. "Evacuate to south exit." The south exit, which was now blocked by a collapsed balancing rig. We were trapped in a malfunctioning gravity chamber with projectiles firing and structural failure cascading overhead. Most of us froze again. He did not. "3 of you, on me," he ordered, already moving. I followed without conscious decision. He crouched beside Cadet Sereth, whose lower limb was pinned beneath debris. Gravity dipped unexpectedly to near zero. "Now," he said. We lifted the debris together while weightlessness reduced strain. Before gravity surged again, he pulled Sereth free and propelled us toward a partially stable corridor. He was not reacting. He was timing, predicting oscillation patterns in real time. A secondary beam fractured above a cluster of first-cycle cadets too slow to comprehend their danger. He covered the distance in 4 strides. He raised both arms as the fragment fell. Impact reverberated through the chamber. This time he did not fully absorb it. The fragment glanced off his upper torso, slicing fabric. I saw it then. Red. A vivid, oxygen-rich red spreading across dark cloth. Blood. My species' blood is violet. The sight of red is reserved for hazard warnings and emergency signals. It should have triggered recoil. Instead, it triggered something else. He did not look at the wound. He looked at us. "Keep moving." We moved. Under his direction, evacuation became structured. He identified the safest intervals between gravity spikes, directed lighter cadets to leap during low-weight phases, ordered heavier ones to brace during high-load surges to anchor groups. He placed himself where structural collapse probability was highest, between falling debris and fragile bodies. Security alarms echoed through the Academy complex. Minutes passed. They felt like cycles. Finally, with a grinding surge, the gravitatic field stabilized at baseline. The projectors powered down. Emergency bulkheads sealed the chamber. Silence followed. Not the silence of tension. The silence after impact. Smoke drifted from shattered panels, debris littered the floor. Cadets lay scattered, bruised, shaken, alive. Alive. Security teams flooded in, followed by medical units. Only then did the human sway slightly. I was close enough to see the tremor in his hand as adrenaline receded. A medic approached him first, scanning for internal damage. He stepped aside. Others first. The medic hesitated. "You are bleeding." He glanced down as if noticing it for the first time. "It's superficial." The wound was not superficial. The fabric at his shoulder was torn wide now, crimson staining the floor in steady drops. Predators do not shield weaker species. Predators preserve themselves, unless their survival has always depended on cooperation, unless on their world, isolation equals extinction. Instructor Valor approached, crest lowered in something that might have been reverence. "You absorbed primary impact," she said quietly. "You could have been killed." He gave that small, unsettling smile again. "Could have," he agreed. There was no bravado in it, no recklessness, only assessment. The medics insisted, guiding him to a stabilization platform despite his minimal resistance. As they sealed the wound, I watched his expression. Pain flickered there, subtle, controlled, but beneath it was something else. Relief. Relief that none of us had sustained critical harm. That was the moment understanding crystallized. We had feared him because he was strong, because gravity bent more willingly around his frame, because he could overpower us without effort. We were wrong. Strength is predictable. Sacrifice is not. He had not shielded us to demonstrate dominance. He had shielded us because it was instinct. Because on a world where storms flatten cities and unseen microbes wage silent war, survival is communal. You do not endure alone. You endure together. The chamber doors reopened once safety protocols concluded. Cadets were escorted out in shaken clusters. As I passed the stabilization platform, his eyes met mine. There was no triumph there, no reminder of debt, only quiet reassurance. "You're okay?" he asked. The absurdity of the question nearly fractured me. He was the one bleeding. "I am intact," I replied. He nodded once, satisfied. As medics finally transported him toward the infirmary, whispers did not follow. There was no murmur of fear, no anxious speculation, only a heavy, shared comprehension. We were not afraid of humans anymore. Fear implies vulnerability. What we felt now was different, a strategic recalculation. If a single adolescent Deathworlder could turn catastrophic malfunction into organized survival, if this level of control and sacrifice was merely baseline, then any species foolish enough to threaten their world would not face monsters. They would face something far more dangerous, a civilization that does not break when systems fail, a species that assumes disaster and prepares. As the gymnasium doors sealed behind the emergency crews, I looked at the cracked beam still dented where his shoulder had intercepted it. Alloy had bent. He had not. And for the first time since his arrival, a new fear settled into my core. Not fear of him, fear for anyone who ever forces humanity to stop holding back. Rumors travel faster than light, not physically, but socially. Within a single rotation of our gymnasium malfunction, the incident logs had been extracted, duplicated, analyzed, and redistributed across Academy networks. By the next cycle, fragments of biometric data were circulating through interstellar forums. By week's end, commentators on distant core worlds were debating humanity as if they had stood beside us beneath that falling beam. They had not. They saw numbers. We saw choice. Official reports described the event as a temporary gravitic cascade failure resulting in minor structural compromise. Minor. The phrase would have been laughable if not so calculated. Unofficially, the footage leaked. Clips of oscillating gravity fields, kinetic projectiles misfiring, a human intercepting reinforced alloy with his own body. The data analysts fixated on measurable variables.
Skeletal compression tolerance exceeding projected thresholds. Muscular output during beam deflection registering above predicted adolescent averages. Pain response latency. Cardiovascular stabilization time. They built models. Simulated combat outcomes. Revised threat matrices. Across the Galactic Council chambers, one phrase surfaced repeatedly. Humans are volatile but contained. It had been the consensus since first contact. Emotionally intense, physically formidable, historically war-prone, but contained. Earth was geographically distant from central trade corridors, politically cooperative, militarily modest compared to major powers, contained. After that day, containment sounded naive, because the incident revealed something the models could not quantify. Strength was never their defining trait. It was adaptability under chaos. Instructor Vaylor summoned our cohort to a private debrief. The chamber lights dimmed, isolating us from external surveillance feeds. Her crest remained lowered, an acknowledgement of the gravity of her words. "You witnessed controlled lethality," she began. A murmur shifted uneasily. "You saw a being capable of inflicting catastrophic harm," she continued, choosing instead to calculate, to shield, to limit. Her gaze swept across us. Imagine uncontrolled. The word hung heavy. None of us spoke. We had already imagined it. In the nights following the malfunction, I replayed the moment of impact repeatedly, not the beam striking his shoulder, but the milliseconds before, the precision of his movement, the immediate prioritization of others over self. Controlled lethality, a blade sheathed not by weakness, but by decision. Meanwhile, the human returned to routine. He attended xenobiology lectures, submitted tactical analysis assignments, sat in the dining hall sharing nutrient bars with first-cycle cadets who still stared at him with residual awe. He laughed. The sound startled me the first time I heard it after the incident.
Not because it was menacing, because it was ordinary. He assisted Cadet Sereth with recalibrating a damaged limb brace. He volunteered for additional lab shifts when gravity systems required stress testing, as if nothing significant had occurred. That contradiction unsettled the Council more than the beam footage. A species capable of immense destruction, choosing patience. Historical archives began surfacing across academic networks, case studies from early human expansion beyond their solar system, records of first contact skirmishes where humans absorbed disproportionate casualties to evacuate allied civilians, trade agreements where humans transferred terraforming techniques without demanding territorial concessions.
war logs classified for decades, revealing retaliatory campaigns so decisive they ended conflicts within single rotations. Patterns emerged. Humans uplift allies. Humans retaliate decisively. Humans protect disproportionately. Their wars are terrible. Their peace is stubborn. I accessed archived footage of a border dispute centuries prior, long before my species joined the Council. A human fleet, outnumbered 3-1, positioned itself between an aggressor armada and a refugee convoy belonging to a minor species. The human commander's transmission was preserved in public record. "We will not fire first, but we will finish it." They did not fire first. When fired upon, they finished it. The aggressor government collapsed within 2 cycles. Volatile. Yes. Contained? Only by their own restraint. Back at the academy, subtle shifts unfolded. Cadets who once avoided partnering with him now requested his inclusion in cooperative drills, not out of fascination, but strategy. He did not dominate, he optimized. In tactical simulations, he consistently assumed systems would fail, communications would drop, supply lines would fracture. Plan for the worst day, he advised during one exercise, then anything better is advantage. It was not paranoia.
It was preparation encoded into culture. I began studying Earth's environmental history in earnest. Mass extinctions, ice ages, pandemics, global wars, repeated existential threats. And yet, they persisted. Not unchanged, but adapted. We had believed resilience meant surviving once. Humanity defined resilience as iterative transformation. Every catastrophe became curriculum, every failure refinement. The Council's discourse evolved from curiosity to strategic anxiety. If a civilization trained its youth to anticipate collapse, if its baseline psychology assumed adversity, then traditional deterrence models faltered. You cannot threaten extinction to a species that has rehearsed it. You cannot intimidate with hardship a culture that treats hardship as teacher. One evening, I encountered him alone on the Academy's observation terrace, overlooking the starfield. He leaned against the railing, shoulder bandaged but functional. "Your council is debating us," he said without turning. It was not a question. "You are aware?" I asked. He nodded slightly. "We expected it." Expected. "Does it concern you?" I pressed. He considered before answering. "He concerns us when fear turns into preemptive decisions." A chill traced my spine. Preemptive, aggression, overcorrection, he clarified. Sometimes people see potential threat and decide to eliminate it before it grows. "And if that happens?" I asked. He finally looked at me. There was no smile this time. "If someone comes for Earth," he said evenly, "we won't be confused about what to do." The statement contained no boast, no anger, only clarity. In that moment, the scale shifted. We had feared human violence. What we should have been evaluating was human loyalty. Because if the being who shielded us beneath a falling beam represented their baseline moral instinct, if protection was reflex, then any species foolish enough to endanger Earth would not face reckless berserkers. They would face organized, adaptive, strategically patient defenders. And patience, when combined with capability, is terrifying. As the council chambers continued their debates, one conclusion crystallized across multiple intelligence briefings. Humanity is not dangerous because it seeks war. It is dangerous because it survives it. The galaxy once felt primitive fear at the idea of Deathworlders entering interstellar society. Now that fear was mutating, becoming calculation, becoming caution. Because by observing one adolescent specimen in a malfunctioning gymnasium, we had glimpsed something larger, a civilization forged by pressure, refined by empathy, conditioned by disaster, restrained by choice. And I understood with unsettling certainty that the Academy had not merely accepted an exchange student, it had invited a preview. If ever pushed too far, if ever containment transformed into confrontation, the being who shielded us beneath falling alloy would not hesitate to shield his world, and he would not stand alone. As I left the terrace, the stars seemed less distant, not because they had moved, but because humanity, once categorized as peripheral and manageable, now felt central to every strategic equation. The galaxy had miscalculated. The question was no longer whether humans were volatile, The question was what would happen the day they decided volatility was necessary, and whether any of us would be prepared when restraint ended. Repairs were efficient. The Academy prides itself on that. Within 3 cycles, the fractured beam had been replaced, gravitic stabilizers upgraded, kinetic dampeners redundantly reinforced. The gymnasium gleamed again, polished alloy unscarred, systems humming at textbook precision. Routine resumed. But nothing felt ordinary. We entered the chamber differently. We scanned the ceiling. We calculated exits. We noted the pitch of the gravitic field before trusting it.
We had learned something that no lecture had ever managed to teach us. Systems fail. Preparation matters. And in the center of the chamber stood the human, shoulder fully healed, expression as calm as the day he first arrived. We no longer saw him as anomaly. We saw him as proof, a warning, and a promise. Instructor Vaylor initiated standard warm-up sequences, though her gaze drifted more frequently now, watching not just for performance metrics, but for mindset shifts. Midway through the session, the human raised a hand. "Request," he said evenly. Vaylor regarded him with measured interest. Stated, "Increase gravity to 1.1 baseline," he replied. A ripple of surprise moved through the cohort. "That is within safe parameters," Vaylor acknowledged carefully, "but unnecessary." He nodded. So was running at baseline, until it wasn't. The reference needed no clarification. Vaylor studied us. "You consent?" she asked the group. The silence stretched. Then Voren lifted his chin. "We consent." One by one, we echoed the affirmation. The gravitic field hummed. Pressure increased. It was subtle at first, and added heaviness in the limbs, a faint compression against thoracic cavities. Movements required marginally more force. Balance demanded sharper attention. My muscles protested within minutes. The human observed, not from superiority, but from analysis. "Shorten stride," he advised me quietly during sprints. "You're overextending under higher load." I adjusted. Efficiency improved. He moved among us during drills, offering micro-corrections. "Lower your center. Breathe through the strain. Don't fight the weight. Work with it." He was not demonstrating dominance. He was teaching resilience. By the end of the session, exhaustion gripped us, but so did something else. Capacity. The next cycle, he requested 1.15. Vaylor hesitated only briefly before approving. Muscles strained harder. Lungs burned more quickly. Several cadets stumbled. "Start small," he reminded us.
You'll adapt. The phrase became rhythm. Incremental increases, micro-adjustments, recovery protocols refined. We learned to anticipate fatigue before it compromised form, learned to redistribute load across muscle groups, learned to treat discomfort not as signal to retreat, but as information. Fear shifted categories. It was no longer paralyzing. It was instructive. Weeks passed. At 1.2 baseline, what once felt oppressive now felt demanding but survivable. We had not transformed into Deathworlders, but we had changed. Instructor Vaylor addressed us privately after one session. "You are different," she said. We were. Our posture had altered. Movements carried more intention. Our discussions and tactical lectures now included contingency layers once dismissed as excessive. We thought like systems could fail. We planned accordingly. On the final day of term, gravity returned to standard baseline. It felt light, almost forgiving. The human stood before us, not elevated on platform, not positioned as instructor, simply among us. He had declined ceremonial commendations for the malfunction incident, refused public recognition beyond official report. This gathering was informal, personal. He regarded us with that familiar, measured gaze. "When I first got here," he began, "you were afraid of me." A few frills flickered in embarrassed acknowledgement. "That's fair," he continued. "I was afraid too." We stiffened. "You?" Voren asked before he could restrain himself. He nodded once. "New place, different species, didn't know how you'd react." The admission destabilized more assumptions than any demonstration of strength. "You didn't seem afraid," I said. He gave a faint smile. "Fear isn't weakness, it's information." Silence settled.
not tense, but attentive. If something scares you, he continued, it means it matters, or it's dangerous, or you don't understand it yet. The mistake is pretending it's not there. He stepped closer to the center of our circle. On my world, we don't train because we expect everything to go wrong every day. We train because sometimes it does. And when it does, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of preparation. The phrase resonated through the chamber. You increased gravity, Sareth said slowly. Not to show you could endure more, but so we could. He inclined his head. You'll adapt, he repeated softly. Start small. For a Deathworlder, his philosophy was profoundly simple. Adversity is inevitable. Growth is optional. Choose growth. There was no grand speech, no dramatic farewell, just a quiet exchange of nods as term concluded. When he turned toward the exit, the same doors through which he had first entered, silence followed once more. But this silence was different. It was not fear, not uncertainty. It was recalibration. We watched him not as cadets observing a predator, but as peers acknowledging a catalyst. The galaxy had categorized humans incorrectly. We had assumed they were terrifying because they are violent. That was the most superficial interpretation. They are terrifying because they endure. Because when gravity increases, they shorten stride and keep moving. When beams fall, they step forward. When systems fail, they solve. Endurance reshapes environments over time. Water carves stone not by force, but persistence. A species that survives extinction-level events repeatedly does not merely persist, it evolves beyond what tried to destroy it. Some of us would one day serve beside humans in joint task forces. Others would negotiate trade accords. Some would sit in council chambers where strategic decisions regarding Earth would be debated with new caution. None of us would ever underestimate them again. As I left the gymnasium for the final time that term, I paused beneath the replaced support beam. No scar remained visible, but I knew where it had fractured, and I knew who had stood beneath it. Gravity felt lighter now, not because it had changed.
Because we had. And somewhere beyond our world, on a planet of storms and shifting tectonics, billions of humans were living their ordinary lives, training without spectacle, adapting without announcement. If ever pushed too far, if ever forced to stop holding back, the galaxy would not face chaos. It would face preparation. And preparation, when paired with endurance, does not break. It reshapes everything. The doors sealed behind me with a soft hiss. The term had ended. The lesson had not.